August 16, 1977, paramedics were dispatched to Graceland. Elvis Presley's girlfriend, Ginger Alden, was there at the time, along with one of Elvis's closest friends, Joe Esposito. Elvis Presley was a legend, beloved by millions, but the circumstances surrounding his death have been shrouded in mystery. Tonight, for the first time, dramatic new evidence that proves that Elvis Presley was more than the king of rock and roll. Much more. What secret business was Elvis Presley conducting with two different American presidents? Why was Elvis Presley's middle name misspelled on his own grave? Who was this man photographed at Elvis's house 4 months after Elvis allegedly passed away?
I started traveling.
Who was this mysterious phone caller, captured in a conversation recorded in 1981? Why is Elvis Presley's name found on over 1,400 pages of FBI documents? And why are some of these documents still classified? All this and much more tonight. Tonight, live from the Imperial Palace Hotel and Casino and the Legends in Concert showroom in Las Vegas, in a television exclusive, the real story behind the event that shocked the world, the Elvis Files. Maria Columbus is the president of the oldest Elvis fan club.
30, 40 minutes later, Vernon Presley called us.
Monty Nicholson is an investigator for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department.
The body may very well not have been Elvis Presley.
Gail Brewer Giorgio is the best-selling author of Is Elvis Alive? And the Elvis Files.
The only place it's misspelled is at the plaque at Graceland, the final resting place.
Paul Wiest is an internationally renowned handwriting expert.
And handwriting notations were made on them, and Elvis Presley's own handwriting.
Luc Dion is an author and political advisor to the Quebec government and a foreign consultant.
But Elvis Presley was a federal agent, there's no doubt about that.
All these men and women share one thing. They believe that Elvis Presley may still be alive. Tonight, they will tell you why. And now, our host on the Elvis Files, Bill Bixby.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Hello and welcome to the Elvis Files. Now, the stage was Elvis Presley's second home. He spent much of his life performing live to millions of his adoring fans. But we're here to look at another side of Elvis. F. Scott Fitzgerald once said, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in one's mind at the same time." Well, that's what we're asking you to do. Now, I'm sure if we took a hand vote, most of us believe that Elvis Presley passed away in Memphis 14 years ago this week. May I ask, how many of you think Elvis died August 16th, 1977? Would you raise your hands? All right. Now, may we see hands for those who think that Elvis may be alive? Very interesting. Thank you. All right, I must say that I was inclined to go along with the first group. But we think that by the end of our program, you too will be able to hold two opposing ideas in your mind. First, that Elvis Presley passed away in 1977, and secondly, that he still may be alive. Some of the reasons why you might be able to do this are contained right in here. Inside these FBI files is dramatic evidence that there was more to Elvis Presley than meets the eye, much more. These documents prove that Elvis Presley may have had a life or death reason for disappearing from public view. And they also hold information that strongly suggests he was still alive at least 4 years after he was found dead. Now, during this show, we're not going to open any vaults. We're not going to dwell on the Elvis that the world knows so well, the singer, the musician, the actor, and the star. Instead, we're going to show you an Elvis that you never knew before, a man who may have risked everything for the good of his country.
We've brought together a panel of experts who think there was a whole lot more to Elvis Presley than meets the eye, and they're going to share what they know with you tonight. We've set up a special 900 phone line because we want your questions, input, and observations. In a few minutes, we'll tell you how it works. But first, we need to go back to that tragic day in August of 1977 when the world learned that Elvis Presley was gone.
My father was listening to the radio in the back while he was working, and when he told us, we just stopped and cried. It was unbelievable.
He's a guy that shouldn't be dead today.
And the radio announced that he died, and God, we both looked at each other and said, we couldn't believe it, you know.
I do remember being, you know, crying and being all upset because, you know, you had that feeling about him like he was one of us.
It was on the television, the news is how I heard about it. I just felt very sad.
He's like one of the greatest musicians that ever lived.
Every time I see Elvis or hear Elvis sing or see a movie, I get this real warm feeling.
I remember him dying, and I hope his soul's in heaven.
He was a very sensitive and very kind, compassionate human being.
Elvis was the best, the greatest, and of course the king.
It didn't take very long after the announcement that Elvis Presley had died for the crowds of mourners to gather. From all over the world, they came to pay their final respects to a man whom they felt had always respected them. Elvis had been placed in a casket, open for viewing at Graceland. No cameras were allowed by order of the Presley estate. Silently, mourners passed by to say their final farewells. Elvis's cousin, Gene Smith, felt he had to personally say goodbye to the man he had loved so much.
When we viewed the body for the last time, I stood there quite a while looking at his hands, and of course he was always breaking bricks with his hands. He had calluses on the bottom of his hand and big old rough looking knuckles. His nose looked kind of puggy looking, and his right sideburn was sticking out, straight out looked about an inch. And his hairline looked as if it had been a hairpiece, something glued on somewhere. It just didn't look right. And his hands was just as smooth as a newborn's baby's behind, you know. And it seemed like it was sweating around his hairline. It could have been sweat, it could have been glue, I don't know. But I just didn't believe it was him.
Gene was not the only person who noticed that something seemed odd. Maria Columbus, for 20 years now, the president of the Elvis Presley fan club, also experienced some things out of the ordinary. Now, when I spoke to Maria a few weeks back, she had this to say. Tell me what happened when you learned of Elvis's passing.
We were very shocked. And the first thing we did was call Graceland. And we tried to get hold of Elvis's father, but he was obviously busy. And so we left a message to have him call us. And about 30, 40 minutes later, Vernon Presley called us. We told him that we were going to be, flying out there within a couple of hours, and Vernon asked us not to come. But he told us that it was going to be too hectic and too emotional at that time and too busy. He wouldn't be able to really see us, and he said it would be better if we went the week after.
Why do you think that Vernon asked you to wait a week before you came there?
He thought that perhaps he felt we would have noticed things, little details that weren't right, and we would have questioned them. And maybe it would have caused an embarrassing moment for the family.
When you got there a week later, what was the atmosphere?
It was a very carnival atmosphere. We went over to the cemetery. Elvis was in a mausoleum. And there were people selling Cokes and popcorn. And there were people posing with the guards, because they had guards in front of the mausoleum door. We felt nothing of Elvis. And that was carried over a few months later when we got a hold of the inventory of Elvis's estate.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 84 pages long. And it felt wrong. There were so many things missing that should have been on there.
I mean, personal items that you were aware of?
Right. Elvis's diaries were not listed, his journals.
Mm-hmm.
There was even a plane missing. He was listed as having 6 or 7 pieces of jewelry, and, I'm sure Elvis had more jewelry than that.
Oh, yeah.
No photographs of his mother listed. None of his daughter.
But he had quite a number of photographs of his mother, if I remember correctly.
Right.
When we come back, we're going to present more startling evidence that suggests it was not Elvis Presley who was laid to rest in that humid afternoon. Incredible? We're just getting started, so stay with us.
The Elvis Files.
Now, a few minutes ago, we heard from 2 people who believe that Elvis Presley was not laid to rest in August of 1977. But if it wasn't Elvis Presley in the coffin, then who was it? Someone who might have that answer is Gail Brewer Giorgio. Gail is the author of the best-selling books, The Elvis Files and Is Elvis Alive? Now, here's what she had to say when we spoke last week. Let me ask you a question with regard to your book, The Elvis Files. It's significant to you that the name Aaron was misspelled. Why is that so significant?
Elvis was born an identical twin. His twin brother, Jesse Garon, died at birth. With great thought and deliberation, Elvis's parents named him Elvis, A-R-O-N, so that whenever Elvis saw the name of Jesse Garon, he'd always know that Aaron was a part of Garon. So emphatic were his parents to have A-R-O-N spelled with a single A, that when the doctor mistakenly filled out the first birth certificate with 2 A's, this was on January 10th, 1935, they insisted a new one be written, which was dated January 12th, 1935, this new one with the single A spelling. From the time Elvis was able to sign his name, it was Elvis, A-R-O-N. Elvis himself told many people he spelled his middle name with a single A. Biographers and researchers attest to this spelling. Even the Tennessee Historical Commission reports it's A-R-O-N, not A-A-R-O-N. All legal documents show it as A-R-O-N. Yet on Elvis's grave, it is misspelled. It reads Elvis, A-A-R-O-N, Presley. Why? As you know, Elvis was steeped heavily in numerology, that by adding another A to his name, he changed the vibrations of his letters, and he would have been a higher spiritual number. He would have gone up to a 9.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gail Brewer Giorgio. Welcome. All right, I must ask, Gail, isn't it possible that in the haste of putting Elvis to rest, some innocent mistakes were made?
Well, I think the key word, Bill, is haste. Why the haste in having such a grand funeral? Why the misspelling of a name on a grave? Why the moving of the grave? That doesn't make sense. And I believe that a lot of these so-called mistakes are clues.
Now, were these discrepancies simple mistakes or clues that point to a still unexplained direction? We'd like to know what you think. Is it possible that Elvis Presley might be alive? Now, I understand that our phone banks are very overloaded already, so please, let's take a call. Do we have a caller, please?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Yes, my question, in the event that Elvis isn't buried in the backyard at Graceland, where might he be laid to rest?
Gail?
I have no idea, because my premise is that he's not laid to rest.
There you go. Do we have another call, please? Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Bill. I'd like to know why the reason that you didn't call up Howard Stern today like you promised.
Why I didn't call whom?
Howard Stern, the radio personality. This is Captain Jenks.
Oh, hi. Well, I couldn't call Howard Stern because I was a little bit busy here with about 14 interviews and a show to rehearse and an
You
awful
lied,
lot.
Bill.
I did?
Yes, you did. That's very naughty.
Shame on me. Do we have another reasonable caller, please? Hello, do we have a call?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, hi. My name is Louis Morden from Hackensack. I'm just wondering, with all the documented evidence about Mr. Presley's drug use and his poor health, how is it possible that the man can still be alive?
Gail?
Well, I think that's what this show is about. So stay tuned, hang in here, you'll get your answer.
Do we have another call, please? Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Rose.
Hi, Rose.
I'd like to know, if Elvis is alive, why would he be in hiding?
Very good question. Gail, would you care to answer that one?
That's another question we're going to deal with extensively on this show. It's too elongated an answer to give you now, so just stay tuned.
As a matter of fact, it's a 2-hour answer. If you hang in long enough.
Answer, yeah.
Do we have another call, please?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, this is Randy from Philadelphia.
Hi, Randy.
Yeah, I was just wondering, if Elvis is alive, why wouldn't he want all his fans to know? Yeah, I know he has millions of fans. Why wouldn't he want them to know that he's alive?
That's a good one. Yes, Gail.
Yeah, Randy from Philadelphia. I'm from Norristown, Pennsylvania. That's outside of Philadelphia. I think there are clues that have been left. I think he does want his fans to know the truth.
Do we have another caller? Hello out there.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Would you have a question out there? What's your name?
Yes, this is Verna, Marshfield, Missouri.
Hello, Verna.
And I would like to ask, or what you thought, if he was alive and he did come back into the public eye, do you think the public would let him be a person and not have to stay in the hiding and a prisoner in his own home like he had to be before?
Ooh. Gail, what do you think?
That's hard to answer, but perhaps by the end of the show, when we look into the FBI files and so forth, we might have a better feel as to what that answer would be.
If that were to happen, it would be nice to know he could be a little more comfortable in this life. Now, the reason we're here is to try and address more of these issues. And when we return, we're going to look at another controversy, the bizarre circumstances surrounding the official investigation into Elvis's death, so don't go away.
Welcome back to the Elvis Files.
If Elvis Presley is still alive, then the circumstances surrounding his death require more examination. I'd like to introduce you to Monty Nicholson, an investigator with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and author of The Presley Arrangement. Monty Nicholson. Welcome, Monty. Hi, Monty. First question, Monty, do you think there's a remote possibility that Elvis could still be alive?
Based on what I've seen so far, I think the possibility is very real.
All right. Now, Monty, you're a member in good standing with the law enforcement community, so aren't you a little concerned about what your colleagues might say?
Well, of course, I do take some teasing from my peers, but they know that this is something I do outside my career of law enforcement. I just try to do things thorough enough to dispel any real criticism.
All right. When I visited with you some weeks ago, we discussed your views on the discrepancies surrounding Elvis's death.
story released to the public said Elvis died in his bathroom and was discovered by his girlfriend, Ginger Alden. Supposedly, the authorities were notified and resuscitation attempts were continued until Elvis's body was removed. Contrary to what one would expect, a house in disarray and emotional upheaval, speculation has it that not only were the bedroom and bathroom cleaned up, but Ginger Alden, prior to the arrival of the authorities, took the time to get dressed and gain her composure.
If Elvis died in the morning, how is it possible that he could be getting on a helicopter later that day without being observed?
Well, Bill, I'm not sure that he wasn't observed.
Why are you not sure of that?
In 1977, Monty was contacted by a man who claimed he worked for Elvis. He also claimed to have taken 2 photos of Elvis boarding a helicopter with government agents after the time of his alleged death. Upon seeing the photos, Monty became intrigued by the possibility that Elvis may have faked his death. He contacted the man with the photos. At first, he denied having them. Then he changed his mind, adding, "It will cost you to see them again." Monty arranged a meeting with him and went to the address he gave, only to find a vacant house. That man has since disappeared. Inspired by this incident, Monty decided to write the Presley arrangement, which tells the story of how Elvis may have faked his own death. The Presley arrangement was published and placed in a major bookstore chain. Strangely enough, soon after the book started to sell, it also started to disappear. Monty continued to research and write about the mystery concerning the death of Elvis. He was contacted by Gail Brewer Giorgio. During his first conversation, he learned that Gail's book, Orion, had also disappeared from the bookstore shelves. Gail and Monty exchanged information for several months. They concluded that their books may have been suppressed by the same people.
I don't mean to be callous when I say this, but isn't it possible that the book just didn't sell?
Of course, and it's always possible any book wouldn't sell. I called my publicist, and I asked him about this problem. I said, you know, I have friends that are going into the bookstores and asking for my book, and they're being told that they can't even order it. Yet you tell me it's still in the catalog of books in print. He said in 35 years in the publishing business, he'd never heard of such a thing.
There were other discrepancies surrounding Elvis's death. First, in March of 1977, before Elvis died, 2 life insurance policies were cashed in. A secret personal checking account was emptied out shortly before Elvis Presley died. The amount, close to $1 million. And perhaps most odd, some claim that the signature on Elvis's death certificate matches Elvis's own handwriting.
We asked handwriting analyst Paul Wiest to look at these signatures, and here were his thoughts.
I was asked by Gail Giorgio to examine some handwriting of Elvis Presley. She supplied me with a copy of a letter written to President Nixon in 1970 and the death certificate or medical examiner's report at the time of his reported death. I examined these 2 documents and compared them by measuring the slant of the handwriting, the spacing between the letters, spacing between the words, the size of the letters, and the individual letter formations. I also made transparent photocopies where I could lay one photocopy, a transparent copy on top of another one for close comparison. I examined these under transmitted light with a light table. The result of my examination was that I found that the slant matched on both documents, that the size of the letters was the same, the spacing between the letters was the same, and many of the individual letter forms were the same. My conclusions after this exhaustive examination was, in my professional opinion as a document examiner, that the same person who wrote the letter to President Nixon also wrote the Elvis Presley death certificate or medical examiner's report of Elvis Presley's death.
Now, as we said before, it's important in this story to be able to hold 2 opposing ideas in your head at the same time. Now, with that in mind, let's take some more calls from our viewers. Hello? Hello out there.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Who are you?
I'm Judy from Austin, Texas.
Hello, Judy.
I have a question. I know if it was my ex-husband or father that everyone was talking about, I'd be upset. Why hasn't Priscilla or Elvis's daughter come forth to deny the rumors that he is alive?
Very good question. Gail, I'd ask you to answer that.
The world was told that Elvis Presley died on August 16th. And certainly Priscilla Presley said that too. But I think later we'll find out when we examine the FBI files why they may not have been telling the whole truth.
All right, it's another wait and see. Hello, do we have another call?
Yes, this is Tammy Smith.
Hi.
And I'd like to know if there's been any other sightings at Graceland in the last 6 months.
Gail?
I have not heard of any sightings at Graceland in the last 6 months, but we are going to show you a sighting at Graceland.
Tease, tease, tease. Hello, have we another call?
Yes, this is Dean Schrader from Lodi, Wisconsin.
How do you do?
Now, Elvis loved his daughter so much. I was wondering why that Graceland wasn't inherited to her when she was 25. I knew 4 of the bodyguards, and I knew that Elvis faked his death a couple times in the hospital until the press come and he said he just wanted to see if he could pull it off. That and why the life insurance policy was never cashed in.
Oh, very good. Gail.
Elvis Presley left his entire estate to his daughter Lisa. She was to inherit it in 1993 at the age of 25. In 1988, the conditions of that will have been changed. She will not inherit the estate till 1998.
Hello, do we have another call? Hello?
You have Scarlett from Gainesville, Georgia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm just fine, thank
Good.
you. I'd like to ask Miss Giorgio as to why the family or no one will allow the body to be exhumed.
Oh, please.
Gainesville, Georgia, hi, that's where I live.
That's just outside of Philadelphia.
To have a body exhumed, number one, you would have to go to court, prove a crime had taken place. No one has done that. There has been no attempt to do it. That's the way it is.
I'll also ask Monty, that would be the legal case in this, is that correct?
Absolutely, and to this point, there just simply isn't any evidence of criminal activity.
All right. Hello, do we have another caller? Ah, we have a tone.
Need you to turn down the on your TV.
Hello? If you're watching out there, I think you're being asked to turn down the television set so that we will not get feedback. Hello?
Hello?
Hi. Hello?
Hi.
Hello? You have a question? Turn down your television set because we're getting a lot of reverb here.
Okay.
Okay. What's your question, please?
Oh, hi, Bill.
Hello.
Yes, I have a question.
All right.
In reading the tabloid, The Sun, I understand that he was in Texas, somewhere in Texas, a small town there, and he presented a car, a 1988 Cadillac, to a lady there. They went to a notary public and supposedly signed the title over to the lady under the name of John Barrows. Has anyone bothered to go and check with the notary to see what she thought?
First, it's interesting that it's an 88 Cadillac. Now, do you have any information with regard to this
Well,
car?
that story appeared recently, I believe in the past couple of weeks. So obviously I haven't had time to check it out. But yes, I read the story, and there were quite a few sightings.
But we do not have the answer as to whether it was registered or not. So obviously we have a controversy here. So far, we have addressed the possibility that Elvis might not have passed away when everyone thought he did. Now let's assume for a moment that that's true, and that he is alive. It stands to reason that someone, somewhere, would have encountered him. When we return, we're going to examine a couple of instances where reliable witnesses swear they spoke with Elvis Presley. Fantasy or fact? That's for you to decide. All right. I love you people. All right. Now, Gail, you are the person most responsible for this controversial issue of whether Elvis Presley is alive or dead. Now, her story is a fascinating one, and no matter what you believe, it is a story worth telling. Gail, why don't you tell us how you became involved in this case?
Well, I, like the rest of the world, heard the news that Elvis Presley died at the age of 42, and I was shocked. When I heard that Elvis Presley had died, I was amazed. it seemed that almost overnight a very mortal man was deified. My curiosity led me to write the novel Orion, a fictitious story about a singer who was a prisoner of his fame, a man who ended up hoaxing his own death. The book was sold to a major publisher, a sizable advance was received, as well as a promise of extensive promotion. After the book was released, I began receiving calls that the books were rapidly disappearing under very strange circumstances. More than one store reported that men in business suits came in and purchased the books in quantities, and that once they were gone, the stock was never replenished, which is a very strange business practice. My repeated calls to the publisher were ignored, my questions unanswered. Meanwhile, as I was investigating the mysterious disappearance of my book, the media and many of the fan clubs were questioning the death of Elvis Presley. Several fans brought to my attention the fact that Elvis's middle name was misspelled on his grave at Graceland. This and other discrepancies led me to write Is Elvis Alive? I was then contacted by Monty Nicholson, a veteran investigator with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, who had written a book called The Presley Arrangement, which focuses on Elvis faking his death. Monty and I compared notes and found that despite never having heard of each other, our information was almost identical. My appearances on radio and television shows led to many phone calls, leads, lots of new information. In October of 1988, around 2:30 in the morning, a call came to my home from a man identifying himself as Elvis Presley. Realizing, of course, that he could have been an impersonator, I asked some key questions which were answered correctly. And although my equipment was antiquated, I taped the call.
And in fact, you have a tape of that phone call and a transcript of some of the conversation.
Yes, it was kind of funny. It's like the dentist with cavities. I had a very poor tape recorder. We were in the midst of moving, and I went into the garage and got this old clunky tape recorder with a suction cup that didn't stay on the phone very well. But anyway, I did the best I could, and the call did come in.
Major surgery?
Major shock.
What happened?
Surgery. Major shock.
What happened?
On my daughter, and it was a surprise to me.
Oh, okay.
It was a very big surprise.
Was Priscilla there?
Priscilla was everywhere. We really didn't favor.
Well, I mean, was she at the wedding?
Yeah, she was there.
Is she happy about it?
Yeah, you can ask her. I was thinking, she has old people.
Well, maybe you'll be a grandfather one of these days.
Well, I'll definitely be part of my grandfather.
You'd definitely be out?
The dust will settle and everything before then.
Oh,
believe me.
Now, how is the world going to react to Elvis Presley being a grandfather?
It's not a question, it's how I'll react.
People have asked if it was a wax dummy in the coffin, and I laughingly say, well, there was a wick at the top of the head.
Well, thank goodness nobody lived.
The great meltdown, huh?
Worse than that, nuclear reactor. The biggest story of the meltdown in history.
All right. I'm curious, how many of you here think that was Elvis Presley? May I see a show of hands, please? All right. Now, Gail, what makes you think it was actually Elvis talking to you?
Well, I asked him questions that only Elvis would know the answers to. He answered correctly. Plus, it was a very compelling way he spoke. What do you think?
Well, all right. Right now, three possibilities come to mind. First, that you wrote and you produced a phone call yourself in order to sell some books. How would you respond to that?
Well, I can't prove that that's not true, but I can emphatically state it is not true. The call came into my home. I took it. I taped it.
All right. The second possibility has to be that you received a crank phone call from one of the best Elvis impersonators I've ever heard, because I know Elvis, I knew the sound of his voice, and that caller would have fooled me. And of course, then the third possibility would be that Elvis, in fact, did call you.
Well, of course, as I mentioned, the thought of an impersonator crossed my mind. I did ask him questions. He answered correctly. But that tape was also played for Gene Smith, Elvis's first cousin. He stated he believed it was Elvis, that all the nuances were correct. I believe it was Elvis.
All right. Are you aware of anyone else that Elvis called?
Yes, I am. There was an associate editor of the Detroit newspaper, Kelly Burgess. She received calls, saw him, and actually went to her grave swearing she had spoken to Elvis Presley.
Well, before Kelly passed away, she appeared on a talk show. Now, when we come back, we're going to share her story with you. So stay with us.
Elvis Files.
Now, for obvious reasons, the whole idea of people actually seeing Elvis has been subject to ridicule. Well, as we've been saying throughout the program, you need to have an open mind. Now, right now, we're going to bring you the story of Kelly Burgess, a former reporter with the Detroit News who became intrigued with the possibility of Elvis being alive when she read Gail Giorgio's book. Now, after hearing rumors that Elvis was being seen in Kalamazoo, Michigan, she decided to go and investigate firsthand. Kelly passed away in November of 1989, but she told her story on a local talk show a few months before she died. Now, this is Kelly's own story, recreated exactly as she claimed it happened.
Though Kelly was a casual fan of Elvis Presley, she knew a good story when she saw one. In August of 1988, she decided to go to Kalamazoo. She went with an open mind. She thought there was a possibility that Elvis Presley could be alive. Kelly's investigation led her to a newly converted office building, formerly a hotel. In 1985, 3 mysterious businessmen had financed the renovation. Though there were offices inside, some of the floors remained sealed off from the public. Kelly decided to take a chance and see what she could find. As she canvassed the building, she repeatedly inquired as to Elvis's whereabouts. Ultimately, her tenacity paid off. And amazing as it may sound, Kelly felt for certain she saw Elvis. Kelly was soon ushered out of the building. But she was convinced she had seen Elvis Presley. She decided to write a book that would, in her mind, prove the existence of Elvis. Sadly, Kelly passed away before she could complete her task. Subsequently, all of her notes disappeared.
Did Kelly actually see Elvis? Gail, what's your opinion?
I believe Kelly Burgess saw Elvis Presley. Kelly was a seasoned journalist. She was not a new kid on the block. She was with a major Detroit newspaper. She's not easily fooled.
Now, I understand there are other Kalamazoo connections.
Yes, there are. Many people know that Elvis Presley and Muhammad Ali were very, very close friends. They visited each other. There's many pictures taken of them together pre-1977. However, there was a picture taken that appeared in 1984 when Muhammad Ali was in the hospital, and as he came out of the hospital, he came out with Jesse Jackson, another unidentified man, and there was a fourth man. It was caught by a UPI photographer. It's identical to Elvis Presley.
Well, if that isn't Elvis Presley, it certainly bears a close resemblance.
Actually, that picture was shown to Muhammad Ali. Mm-hmm. He identified it as Elvis Presley. And the picture was shown to Elvis's stepbrother, Billy Stanley, who also said it was Elvis Presley. Is it Elvis? Could be.
Well, now wait, what about Reverend Jesse Jackson? What did he say about it?
As far as I know, Jesse Jackson has no comment.
No comment?
No comment.
All right, I would like to say that if the Reverend Jesse Jackson happens to be watching the show, we would appreciate if you would call in and clarify this particular moment in time. And if you don't happen to be watching the show, any friends of yours who might pick up on this information today, we'd appreciate hearing from you as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Now, that isn't the only photograph allegedly taken of Elvis Presley. When we come back, we're going to bring you the strange story of another picture taken in Elvis's own backyard, several months after he was supposed to have died. Now, who do you think this is? Think about it, and we'll be right back.
Don't forget to call 1-900 The Elvis Files.
All right, I'm curious. Now, how many, please, in our audience have been to Graceland? May we see some hands? Ooh, quite a number of you. All right. What would you think if you'd visited Graceland, taken some typical tourist pictures, and then in the privacy of your living room, notice what seemed to be the face of Elvis Presley staring right out at you? I think you'd get very excited. Well, this is precisely what happened to a man named Mike Joseph on New Year's Eve Day, December 31st, 1977. Now, recently, Mike was interviewed about the events leading up to this amazing picture. Let's watch.
It was New Year's Eve, 77, when I took my wife and my son and my nephew down to Graceland. They had just opened up Memory Gardens where Elvis was laid to rest. And we were there for an hour, and we left back for home. Had the pictures developed, and looked at them, put them away. One day after reading a book, I decided to look at my pictures again. I pulled them out, and this time I saw something in one of the pictures that I hadn't seen. My God, I had Elvis Presley sitting in the doorway, looking out at the fans walking past his grave. I have had the negatives examined by Kodak. And Kodak basically says that they are original. They have not been tampered with in any way. They were taken in sequence, uncut by the negatives, being original. They can tell. The emulsion number of the film was manufactured in 77. Each roll of film that is manufactured has a manufacturing date on it in the emulsion number. This is the shot that I took of the people walking and the bathhouse in the distance. We zero in here, and this is the same shot with just the chair. No one sitting in the chair. So that shows it was not a picture of someone sitting in the chair. This is my son once again blocking the doorway, and of course the picture where I first spotted the silhouette in the doorway.
All right. How many of you think that Mike Joseph photographed Elvis Presley? May we see some hands? Ah, it's getting more interesting. Well, the key question here is this. Why would Elvis risk going back to Graceland if he had engineered his own disappearance? Why would he be so careless as to sit in an open doorway? Gail, please.
Well, you have to realize at that point in time, the inner grounds were off limits to tourists. Plus, there was an entire swimming pool that separated Mike Joseph from the pool house door. Elvis probably didn't think he was seen. Careless? Yeah, presidents have been careless too, if you remember Watergate.
I do. I can remember that far back. All right, to play devil's advocate here, it seems to me that if Elvis is really trying to hide out, he's not doing a very good job. I mean, he's taking meetings with the reporters, he's making late-night phone calls. It's hardly the behavior of someone trying to keep a low profile.
Well, maybe this is all part of a larger plan. Maybe Elvis intends to return. He may be in a catch-22 situation.
Well, perhaps the most convincing piece of evidence that suggests that Elvis may still be alive is the mystery audio tape. Now, let's take a brief listen before we continue.
At the time, I had a beard and I lost a few pounds. And I thought it would be very, very hard for anyone to recognize me.
All right, this tape was released to the general public in Gail Giorgio's book, Is Elvis Alive? Now, at the time, the origin of the tape was unknown. But since the publication of that book, new information has been uncovered. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce Maria Columbus, the president of the oldest Elvis Presley fan club. Hi, Maria. Okay. Now, Maria, will you please tell us about the tape?
Okay. I received this tape in 1981 from Steve Chances from Florida. He had written a book called Elvis, Where Are You? Now, on this tape, you only hear Elvis speaking. The person he was speaking to was edited out.
Yes, I noticed. I noticed that. Well, part of it was edited out. Why would anyone edit out one of the parts of the conversation? That sounds sort of suspicious to me.
Yes, it's suspicious to me, too. The only thing I could think of is that the person did not want to be recognized. But I believe it is Elvis speaking.
Curiouser and curiouser. All right, we brought in an audio analyst to find out if the voice on the tape is, in fact, that of Elvis Presley. When we come back, we'll present his results, and also we'll take more of your phone calls, so hang in there.
Casino and the Legends in Concert showroom in Las Vegas.
Have 2 years of sobering Army life changed your mind about rock and roll?
Sobering Army life. No, it hasn't. It hasn't changed my mind because I was in tanks for a long time, you see. And they rock and roll quite a bit. I started traveling all over the world. And it's been enjoyable, but it's been a constant battle of growing beards and this and that to keep them being recognized.
Who was recorded during that 1981 phone conversation? Was it Elvis Presley? One way we can find out is to utilize some tools from law enforcement to electronically contrast and compare the voice of the real Elvis Presley and the voice on the tape. L.H. Williams works with a major police department in Texas and is an expert on audio voice prints. And here is his report.
Gail had sent me a copy of a transcript of the tape recording of the unknown person, and this was 4 pages long. In this process, I also requested copies of known tape recordings of Elvis Presley, and I followed the guidelines that were established during the Watergate case for possible authentication of the tape recording. I selected the same words and phrases of the known and the unknown person for comparison purposes. This is the known sample of Elvis Presley stating the word music. This is a sample from the unknown tape recording showing the word music. The formats that were formed fall within the same frequency range through here, which would indicate a match. Basically, the known voice of Elvis Presley compared with the voice on this tape is the same.
Now let's assume for a second that this test conclusively proves that Elvis made this recording. Can we be sure that it was made after 1977? We've made a transcription of the recording and we marked down specific things that the caller said. If any one of these comments describes events that happened after Elvis's alleged death, then the argument that he might still be alive is stronger.
People ask me all the time where I'm living, and naturally I can't say, but it's a good place to hide. And there was an island that I had learned about a long time ago, and I guess I always knew that someday I'd probably have to use it. I must have spent a year on the island. I started traveling all over the world, and it's been enjoyable, but it's been a constant battle, growing beards and this and that to keep from being recognized. And I guess about 2 years ago, I went to Europe, which is something I've always wanted to do, something I've wanted to do for a long time. I realized that sooner or later, it's probably going to end. You know, I hate to think that it's going to end, but I know sometime the secret has got to be let out. If it hadn't been for being involved in what I'm involved in now, you know, things as such, maybe it'd been different.
Well, I think that last statement speaks for itself. But, Maria, let me ask you about some of the other things that we heard. Prior to his death, had Elvis ever spent a year on an island, any island?
No, he didn't. He never spent a year away from the public eye. He was in the public eye all the time. We would have heard about it.
All right, when Elvis was 24, we know that he was in the Army and he went to Europe. But did he go to Europe 2 years before that?
No, the first time he went to Europe was when he was going to Germany in the Army in 1958.
All right, let's find out what some of our callers think. Hello, do we have a call? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Yes, your name, please?
Kevin?
Hi, Kevin, what would you like to ask?
I would like to know if Elvis is in hiding, how he could ever come back after reported deaths of a girl in Graceland supposedly attending his funeral. If it actually happened, the father would sue if he came back. How could he come back out of hiding without being sued?
I'm not sure that I understand the question, but do you understand it, Gail?
Yes, I understand the question. Actually, 2 girls were run down outside of Graceland by a renegade car. I think Maria knows a little more about that. It wasn't Elvis's fault.
Yes,
No.
please, Maria.
It was a tragedy that occurred before, I believe it was before Elvis was buried. And, you know, he had no control over that. Nobody did. I believe the young man went to jail.
I see. Well, that's yet to be answered then. Do we have another call? Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Yes, I have a question for both ladies.
Yes.
Yes, have they both taken a lie detector? And I have a question for the detective. And what kind of charges would be filed against him if he is still alive?
All right. I'll be back to you. Have you taken a lie detector test?
On what?
On what? Well, have you ever taken, with relationship to your book or any of the information here, have you ever taken a lie detector?
Well, actually, the information in my book isn't anything I made up, so how could, I mean, I didn't change the name on the grave. I didn't write on the FBI
But
file.
you didn't take it, you haven't taken a polygraph?
There would be no reason to. I mean, there's no question they could ask me because I had nothing to do with it.
No, I haven't.
No?
No.
Neither have I, by the way. The other question was, I think, the charges. What would the charges be?
As we've stated before, there were some insurance policies that weren't cash, and there was a reason for this. These policies were paid up, and as long as the owner cashes these policies in, there's no fraud involved.
That would be the first 2 policies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, we have information that a 3rd policy has not been cashed or been claimed, and that policy is not paid up. The point being, there would be no criminal charges that I know of to date, because we have no record of any criminal activity. It's not against the law to fake your own death and to be someone else. Only against the law to impersonate another and gain something for yourself through fraudulent means.
I see. So collecting on the 3rd insurance policy would be fraud were he to be alive.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Now, so far, we've introduced you to witnesses who believe that Elvis Presley was not really buried in August of 1977. We've also presented evidence that Elvis Presley has been seen on multiple occasions, and perhaps most importantly, we presented what appears to be physical documentation that Elvis has been photographed and recorded. Now let's make an assumption for a moment. Elvis Presley staged his own death. Why would a man blessed with wealth, fame, extraordinary talent choose to vanish from the public this way? When we return, we're going to present dramatic new evidence that may finally answer that question. Elvis Presley was many things to many people. But what you don't know was that he was a man who may have sacrificed everything he had for his country. Sound unbelievable? Stay with us.
When the Elvis Files return, we'll bring you the full story.
Just who was Elvis Presley? A rock and roller, movie star, devoted father, world-famous celebrity. There was the public Elvis, and then there was the private Elvis. Two of his favorite hobbies were law enforcement and religious studies. Both of these passions may have inspired the chain of events that took place on August 16th, 1977.
Before Elvis Presley wanted to be a singer, he wanted to be in law enforcement. By 1970, Elvis had received many honorary and real law enforcement credentials and was convinced that he had unique services he could offer his country. And being Elvis, he decided to get what he wanted by going straight to the top. In December of 1970, Elvis flew to Washington, D.C., writing a letter en route to then-President Richard Nixon. Dear Mr. President, first, I would like to introduce myself. I am Elvis Presley and admire you and have great respect for your office. I talked to Vice President Agnew in Palm Springs 1 week ago and expressed my concerns for our country. The drug culture, the hippie elements, the SDS, Black Panther, etc., do not consider me as their enemy, or as they call it, the establishment. I call it America. In this letter, Elvis volunteered to become a federal agent, saying his contacts with the youth culture would allow him access into worlds that other undercover agents could only dream of penetrating. After the letter arrived at the White House, some of Nixon's aides debated whether it would be in the president's interest to meet with Presley. Here is the memo that decided the issue. Nixon took the advice and decided to meet with Elvis to give him the credentials he wanted. Elvis got his wish, a presidential appointment as a secret DEA agent. Some feel that Elvis was just playing make-believe, but it has been verified that Elvis allowed an undercover agent to infiltrate his road crew from 1974 to 1976. What was that secret agent investigating? Nobody will say for sure. At this same time, Elvis had become immersed in writings dealing with human spirituality and religion. Perhaps the most widely known entertainer in the world, Elvis was able to keep both of these sides of his personality a secret to the general public. His spiritual side he kept secret because he wanted to. His undercover life he kept secret because he had to. And this brings us to the FBI files. According to the records, there are more than 1,400 pages of files on Elvis Presley. The first stems from a citizen complaint in 1956 reporting Elvis's bad attitude. The last report was made in 1983 and describes the sale of a car that allegedly once belonged to Elvis. But by far the longest and most significant document covers the years 1976 to 1982. Containing over 1,000 pages, it concerns a criminal investigation and a man named Frederick Peter Proe.
Over 600 pages of these documents are still classified, but what has been released details a far-reaching sting operation that brought down an organized crime ring that stole billions of dollars from their victims. And the man who may have been an integral part of the success of this operation, called Fountain Pen, was Elvis Presley. In order to make sense of these documents, we've invited one more distinguished guest to join us. His name is Luc Dion. He's from Quebec, and Luc formerly worked for the Quebec government, but for the last year, he's dedicated much of his spare time to uncovering the working of Operation Fountain Pen. Now, trying to condense 1,400 pages of FBI files is a daunting task, but Luc has managed to prepare a short-form version for us. Welcome, Luke. All right, Luke, to just summarize, what do you think happened to Elvis Presley?
Well, I think that Elvis got involved in a very dangerous FBI undercover operation, and in order to protect himself, a member from his family has to arrange his disappearance.
All right. Well, let's start at the beginning. What you're about to see has been verified by recently declassified government documents and Luke Dion's own extensive research.
Our story begins in May of 1976 when Elvis wanted to sell one of his airplanes. Besides the famous Lisa Marie, Elvis owned 3 smaller jets, a Lockheed Jetstar, a Jet Commander, and a Dassault Falcon. In early 1976, Elvis told his father, who handled all of his personal finances, that he wanted to sell the Jetstar. Vernon was loyal to his son, but was apparently not a very good businessman. Vernon was introduced to a man named Frederick Peter Pro in May of 1976. Pro talked Vernon into getting involved with a very complicated leasing arrangement with his company. The Jetstar wasn't airworthy, and Pro also said he would facilitate repairs. But Frederick Peter Pro was, in reality, a con man, a member of a criminal group called the Fraternity, a group with direct ties to organized crime. It has been estimated that the Fraternity managed to con at least $2 billion from people all over the world. And by the spring of 1977, according to an attorney familiar with the case, the Presley estate had lost more than $1 million.
Well, aside from Elvis being a victim of the Fraternity, how does the Presley case relate to Operation Fountain Pen?
At the time that Presley was defrauded by those con men, the Federal Bureau of Investigation were involved in a highly confidential undercover operation called Operation Fountain Pen regarding the illegal activities of a group of con men called the Fraternity that comprised approximately 30 to 40 of the world's top con men.
What's the importance of the Presley case in Operation Fountain Pen?
Well, the Presley case was the catalyst case for the FBI to stop temporarily the illegal activity of at least 2 members of the Fraternity.
What do you mean temporarily?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Fraternity was an organization that comprised 30 to 40 of the world's top con men. Now, the Presley case involved only 2 members of the Fraternity. Now, this organization was still going around, you know, everywhere around the world, defrauding people after the Presley case was done. But temporarily, they succeeded in stopping the Fraternity.
Well, we have to go to a commercial now, but when we come back, we'll take a close look at these once secret files and see how and if they shed some light on what happened to Elvis Presley. So stay with us.
When we come back, the event which occurred. Welcome back to the Elvis Files.
All right, we have just seen how Elvis, wittingly or unwittingly, became embroiled in an undercover FBI operation. It started innocently when Elvis's father, Vernon, tried to get a good deal on one of Elvis's airplanes. Excuse me. Now, it may have ended in what? The following is a chronology of the documented evidence that some believe have resulted in the staged disappearance of Elvis Presley.
On March 4th, 1977, Elvis took his last leisure trip with his friends. According to several people, Elvis behaved unusually, almost as if he was saying goodbye. June 29th, 1977, Elvis gave his last concert in Indianapolis. July 26th, the FBI signaled that the investigation into Frederick Peter Proe finally had enough evidence to go to the grand jury. Early August, Elvis desperately tried to reach President Carter to discuss some urgent personal business. August 15th, United States Attorney Michael Cody advised the FBI that his office was ready to go before the grand jury with the Operation Fountain Pen case. August 16th, Elvis Presley is reported dead at Graceland. October 18th, 4 alleged members of the fraternity, including Frederick Peter Proe, were arrested in connection with the Presley fraud case. Could this investigation have led Elvis Presley to fake his own death?
Do you think it was dangerous enough to justify a sudden disappearance?
Well, that's the point. If you look at the criminal background of certain individuals who were involved in the Presley case, it would be highly justifiable.
Do you think that Elvis was put under the witness protection program?
Well, the fact that the 2 members of the fraternity who were involved with Presley in the Jet Star deal were themselves put under the witness security program is something in itself. If it was dangerous enough for the prime suspect to be put under the witness security program, it was surely good enough for Elvis Presley as the main victim to be put under the program. But Elvis Presley was a federal agent. There's no doubt about that.
All right, Gail, what do you think of all this?
Well, there is no doubt about it. Elvis Presley was a federal agent. His power and clout went to the White House. President Nixon made his appointment. We also know by records that Elvis Presley received a call from President-elect Jimmy Carter at the end of 1976, and President Carter wanted to appoint Elvis to a special commission in the Carter administration. Another call was placed by the FBI between President Carter and Elvis on August 15, 1977. Elvis's name is listed in the Justice Department's Black Book as a federal agent. Plus, there's books at Graceland that seem to be clues. And during Elvis's last concert tour, he made some very strange remarks on stage. It sounded like he was saying goodbye. He would say things like, I am, and I was. And he also said to the audience, he said, I may not look good tonight, but I will look good in my coffin.
Well, couldn't all of this simply mean that Elvis planned to take his own life? It was suggested that he was deeply upset over a lot of books that had recently come out.
Anyone that knows anything about Elvis Presley knows he was very religious. He's even made statements that suicide was immoral. However, everyone knows how Elvis felt about his 9-year-old daughter, Lisa Marie. That was the longest visit she had at Graceland at that time. She was there. The only other bedroom upstairs at Graceland is Lisa's. Do you really think that Elvis Presley would chance his daughter finding a suicide body? And beyond that, Elvis Presley, on the evening of August 15th and into the early hours of August 16th, made an emergency dental appointment to have some work done. That doesn't sound like a man who was planning to take his life in a few hours. Maybe he was planning death, but not suicide.
All right. Let us assume that Elvis did not take his own life. Let us also assume that Elvis did not die of natural causes. Now, do these FBI documents ever mention anything that suggests that Elvis Presley did not die August 17th, 1977? Luke, I put that to you.
Well, they do better than that. I'm convinced that Elvis, in his own verifiable in writing, made different notation on those documents several years after his alleged death.
All right. We have to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll take a close look at these documents.
Welcome back to the Elvis Files.
Welcome back. Our guest is Luc Dion, a French-Canadian who has spent the last year examining the FBI files pertaining to Elvis Presley. Now, Luc, you mentioned that Elvis might actually have written on these documents. Will you tell us more?
Well, when you closely examine those documents, we can find numerous notation and correction that has been made in what I believe is Elvis's handwriting. And I think that I'm almost positive that Elvis Presley continued his involvement in Operation Fountain Pen for several years after his alleged death.
Okay. Now, we brought these documents to handwriting analyst Paul Wiest. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Wiest. Welcome, Paul. Okay, Paul, you have seen these documents. What is your conclusion?
Yes, I certainly have, Bill. This first one, I don't think see it or not, but we have Frederick N. Prohl, et al. Elvis A. Presley, deceased victim. This little circle down here and this cross indicates they should delete this, and here's what was written above to change it and correct it. N-A-M, short for name, they left off the E, Frederick Peter Prohl. This handwriting was compared with known handwriting of Elvis Presley, and it matches very, very closely.
All right, what about the one that says to Memphis?
All right, this is the one that says to Memphis here. And this is also references Frederick Peter Prohl, Elvis Presley, deceased, victim. And down here on the bottom, we see 0.73 to Memphis, 8/15/78. I have compared this to known handwriting of Elvis Presley's and find that this also matches very, very favorably to the handwriting.
Now, to what did you compare all of this writing?
I had a great number of samples of his known handwriting. Number one, of course, was the Nixon letter, the letter that he wrote in 1970 to President Nixon. I had several canceled checks written by Elvis Presley. I had a Christmas gift list. I had a letter to some other friends, restaurant check that he had signed, and numerous other pieces.
Several documents.
Several documents.
Enough material, surely, to
all
compare.
authenticated as known handwriting.
All right, now what about the issue that Elvis Presley signed his own death certificate?
Well, let me hand this back to you, Bill. Number one, that's a misnomer. This is the death certificate. When we say Elvis Presley signed his own death certificate, it's not the death certificate, it is a medical examiner's report, as you can see.
Yes.
He didn't sign it. This was signed by the medical examiner down here.
All right.
But the name right on here, the street address is 3764 Elvis Presley Boulevard. That, I believe, is in Elvis Presley's own handwriting. Also over here under occupation entertainer. They both match up very closely to known handwriting.
All of it was, in your professional opinion, Elvis Presley's handwriting?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Now, Paul's findings were corroborated by handwriting analyst Sheila Lowe. Now, Ms. Lowe is qualified by the California Supreme Court as an expert witness in document examination. We asked Ms. Lowe to compare 10 pages of questionable handwriting notations made in the estate of Elvis Presley inventory dated December 19th, 1977, with a known verified sample of Elvis Presley's handwriting. Each document was viewed with transmitted light on a light table and examined under a microscope. Under penalty of perjury, Ms. Lowe issued the following opinion, and I quote, "After careful examination of the documents, it is the opinion of the undersigned that the handwriting on all documents was executed by the same writer." Okay, Monty, you have seen all the evidence so far. In your professional opinion, do you think that Elvis may have written on his own FBI files?
Well, we only speculate that Elvis may be a member or involved somehow in a government protection program of some type. But we know he was a DEA agent. And most probably, he was involved in working on his own investigation.
All right, but Monty, why are over 600 pages of these documents still classified? I mean, after all, it's been 14 years since Elvis allegedly passed away. So, why? At this point, I think that we should summarize what we've learned so far.
It has been suggested that on August 16, 1977, in order to protect himself and his family from a criminal organization called the Fraternity, Elvis Presley arranged things to look as if he had died. He accomplished this with the help of the Department of Justice by somehow planting either a wax dummy or another body at Graceland. He also secured the cooperation of local officials in covering up both the autopsy results and the trail that might have led to finding out the truth. Then, deliberately misspelling his middle name, Elvis arranged for his coffin to be placed one space over from where he really planned to be interred. Elvis was relocated by the Witness Protection Program to a secret location and has maintained a low profile ever since. He has continued to be in contact with his family and closest friends and has made at least 2 phone calls that have been recorded. He has been seen and photographed several times and has made at least 1 trip to Europe. According to the people who believe this theory, he may soon return to his public.
Well, that in a nutshell is it. We'd now like to give our studio audience a chance to ask questions of our panelists. We've written them down, and I hope I do not mispronounce anybody's name. This is from Maria Stern, Richmond, Virginia, and it is to you, Luke. Why are you the first person to uncover Operation Fountain Pen?
It's a very difficult question to answer. It's like somebody who's watching an apple falling, down from a tree, and somebody one day is asking why. I don't know. I don't have any answer. I just take the time to do an analysis on those files, and I don't know why I'm the first one.
Order.
Yeah,
order.
well,
Okay.
Yeah.
This is from Dennis, I hope I pronounced this, Robbins, optician, and it's to you, Maria. What happened to over 500 pairs of 14-karat gold eyeglasses that I made for Elvis?
That's a very good question. They weren't in the inventory.
So you do not know?
No.
What happened to them? 500 pairs? Oh, the price of gold these days? Huh. Amy Mower, and this is for Gail. Is it true that Elvis's body weighed less than when he was alive?
Yes, on the medical examiner's report, the one that we find his handwriting on, it is listed his weight as 170 pounds. Elvis reportedly weighed around 225 to 250.
This is from, oh boy, the way through, Joyce Adonis. I hope that's correct anyway. Thank you very much. And it says to anyone, so the entire panel is open for this. Why didn't Lisa take over Graceland when it was stated in the will that at age 25 it would be hers? Who would prefer to handle that? Gail, I would think you.
Well, for one thing, Lisa isn't 25 years old. The will stated that Lisa Marie would inherit the estate at the age of 25, which would have been in the year 1993. However, in 1988, the conditions of that will were again changed. Lisa will not inherit the estate until she's 30, which would be in the year 1998.
All right. This is from Everland to Monty. Have you ever received a phone call from Elvis or any other form of communication personally?
My post office box, as well as my answering machine, are constantly bombarded with letters and information coming from all over. Occasionally I have had calls in the past from people claiming they were Elvis Presley. As a matter of fact, I just had a call about 2 weeks before this show, but there's no way to verify that over a phone. And unfortunately, I unhooked or disconnected my phone surveillance device that I'd kept hooked up for about 3 or 4 years, hoping he would call, and that night I didn't have it hooked up. But I haven't been able to verify any of those calls.
All right. This is from Ms. Mitzi Hendrickson, and it's to me. Thank you. If Elvis does reappear, how would the media react? Could he still continue his career in the same way? I really don't know. I think if it is uncovered, if it proves to be uncovered that in fact he was working for the best interest of the government, I think he could if that's what he wished to do. But again, as Gail has said, he would probably prefer to come back in some spiritual sense. I really don't know. I just would find it very nice if he could come back, if he is still alive. This is from Virginia Burnell, and it's to Paul Wiest. What are the chances that you and other handwriting experts have in making mistakes in your profession when analyzing written documents?
Well, of course, handwriting analysis and document examination isn't an exact science, 100%. However, my past experience over the last 15 years has been remarkably accurate.
All right. Let's see. This is from James Walker. This is for you, Gail. The question is, let's say for a moment that Elvis is alive. Do you think that he will come out of hiding? And if so, why?
Well, I think all the evidence so far leads us up to believe that Elvis Presley may reappear. However, I don't think he'll come back as an entertainer, but more as a spiritual leader.
Okay, I think we both have answered it that way. Let's hold that thought for just a minute and stay with us, okay? Stay. Well, our time is about up. Now, at the top of our show, we asked our live audience to vote on whether or not they thought that Elvis Presley might be alive. And since then, we've covered a lot of ground, we've talked to a lot of people, and we've raised some very interesting questions. Now, keeping all of that in mind, I'm really curious. How many of you now think there's a chance that Elvis Presley might still be alive? Would you raise your hands, please? That's an amazing percentage change. Now, let's find out how that compares now to the national poll. Whoa. I would like to address something. I've been asked many times, Bill, isn't this show exploiting Elvis's death? Yes, was my feeling. In fact, when I was first asked to host this program, I said no for exactly that reason. But then a body of evidence was presented to me that made the circumstances of August 16th, 1977 debatable. The more I considered what was in front of me, the more I felt that this was an opportunity to present to the world information which had never been brought to light. Now, the next question asked of me, if you're his friend and he is alive, aren't you jeopardizing that same life? Well, anybody interested in using the information presented in this program, information which has been available for at least 4 years, would have done so a long time ago. So if Elvis is alive, he's obviously well protected. Now, certain evidence seen here even suggests that Elvis himself may be reaching out. If anything can be said of this program, hopefully, is that we have left his life with dignity. And I thank you. Thank you, Luke.